Hey everyone, so I released a video a couple years ago called Signs a Shy Guy Likes You, and I have gotten lots of comments on it, and all of them are very similar with a few differences in there. So I decided to make a video to explain to all of you whether or not this guy in school likes you. Because at this point, through all my dating knowledge, all the knowledge I learned from all the dating advice I read up on for years, and all the stuff I went through to learn all that and experience it, and all the videos I've watched on YouTube and everything else, everything's pretty common sense now. Now, that doesn't make me a master, but I'm pretty sure this video will help you out. So this is mainly for the females, which I love. I love the fact that I have female viewers, at least on that video. But this is mainly for the female viewers out there who are wondering, well, does this guy like me or not? And they list all these little tidbit things and they don't know. And again, I feel like this applies to a lot of males too. So male viewers, go ahead and stick around, and I will note the details. So if it's something specific for female or male, I'll let you know, and that way you can tell. So one of the biggest things I get on there, and a lot of them are very similar with their own sprinkle of individualism. Maybe they're in karate class or something like that. But what I usually get a lot on in the comments is something like, I know this guy in class and he always stares at me and I always catch him staring at me. I just don't even know anymore. Does he like me? Chances are, yes, he does. And again, I can understand to a certain extent if you don't know. Maybe you caught him once or twice. But most of the time, these comments are like, this has been the 175th time I've caught him staring at me. Does he like me or not? And this sort of stuff, given my age already, it's like, really? And it really makes me think, because a lot of these commenters are not that young. Like, sure, some may be in middle school, a lot seem to be in high school. At what point do you, like, when do you just enlighten yourself? And although, it's a very interesting thing, because you can say this and it's very logical, and as I'm saying, it's very logical, but then when you're in that moment, the fear of being wrong just overpowers it all, and then you need like strong evidence. Otherwise, it's not worth the risk of embarrassing yourself. And my next piece of advice, and I feel like with equality and feminism and all that stuff, equal rights, you females out there should do the same thing I'm going to give to these male viewers. So this is the advice: man up, okay? You have to do the thing worth doing. If it's worth doing, okay, that sounded horrible. If it's worth doing, it's worth taking that risk for. Now, maybe sometimes you can gauge a few other things and figure it out. But 9 times out of 10, there's so many things you can do rather than just sit there in paralysis and then regret it when you graduate and then you never see them again. Or you only see them on Facebook. Or then years later when you message them on Facebook about it, they've changed their mind, or they thought that you were too cowardly years for not doing it, and then now you finally do it, and then they don't respond to you on Facebook. You don't want that happening to you. So there's so many things you can do. You can, and this goes into another question I always get: what can I do? You don't have to be balls to the wall man and just go up to her one day and confess your love or your interest in her in front of all her friends and everyone in school. There's some social skills, social smarts involved. There's numerous things you can do, varying levels of boldness. And obviously, I feel like sometimes there's no real way around it, and you kind of just have to go up and out and confess to some degree. And that sometimes works better than a lot of this, lesser degree, short-handed, somewhat sly, not really mischievous, but like random stuff you can do, like just talking to her about the weather and then using your body language and stuff and showing her that you're more than interested, or just like how you talk to her and hold her and touch her. Like that can work, I guess, but you have to be good at it. And sometimes, sometimes it's just better to cut out the crap. You can waste months, years, days, weeks doing all this, and then you find out either this person already has a significant other, a girlfriend or boyfriend, or she's not interested, or a lot of other stuff, and you wasted all this time and energy, and it's just like she's leading you on, and then you get angry because she's doing all this to lead you on, and that's not what a good person does, and all this stuff. So there's that. Anyhow, I guess I'll move on to the next big thing that is in the comments for this video. It's something along the lines of, hey, I always catch him, spending the extra time to stay with me, or spending extra time to be with me, or taking time to help me when he doesn't have to, or stuff like he will spend time and treat me differently when he's with me than when he's with his friends. And again, this applies to both genders. If it's a female doing it, same thing. I think she likes you. I mean, that's usually the answer. Like it's like, why? Well, obviously there's that 1% chance. But if she's constantly doing it, it's like, I mean, what do you think? Think about it. You can literally just legit go up and ask her, why are you doing this? And if she gives some weird response, she shies away, then maybe she has to like you. What other reason can there be? Other than that, if you literally go up to her and ask her, and she tells you some other reason, then you're good to go. So why not go up and ask her? Well, probably because you're shy and you don't want to push that onto her because she likes you deep down somewhere. And so I think I get a lot of these comments, and a lot of it is from the youthful group of students in school, and I think it's very interesting because it really makes me think, like, wow, I was so dumb when I was young, and so are all these youthful children. And technically I am still kind of dumb in this way because, even though I know all this and I can pretty much tell, sometimes it's like, it's maybe it's because they hide it, or it's not really as obvious as 174 occurrences, more like 2 or 3, then I can't lie but be on the safe side sometimes. And it makes a lot of sense, especially when you're in one of those close-knit communities where you don't want to screw things up and embarrass yourself. But I do feel like generally, for the most part, you will be in situations in life where you will never see that person again, especially if you grow up to live in a big city or just somewhere. There's so many cities out there with 100,000, 1,000,000 people. You'll bump into someone and it's kind of sad, but you will never meet them again. Or you'll go on the street and you could do the most bizarre thing ever, the most crazy thing ever, and no one will care. They're just too busy trying to get to work, too busy doing stuff. So sometimes you have to realize the world is bigger than me, and it's okay. And it's not like 10,000 years ago where if I screw up, then everyone in the town of 100 people I live in is gonna shame me and excommunicate me. And unfortunately, that's how your genetics are still wired. Your DNA is still wired to live like that because it doesn't know you've grown up in a new environment constructed by the rapid spread of technology nowadays. And it's funny because I'm sure there's people watching this in their 20s and 30s who still kind of have a tough time with this. I mean, Oftentimes, many people don't ever really figure it out. They just luck out and manage to stumble across uh, their husband or wife, and it works out from there. But for the rest of us unlucky folks, you know, uh, there's plenty of instances. I'll say this, that I regretted out of inaction in terms of dating. Not really even getting as far as dating, just like approaching, making friends with, forming a connection with, rather than those instances where I was embarrassed or humiliated or rejected, because it all just washes away at the end of the day. Like, generally, like, the world's such a big place that, like, I mean, it's more than that. It's just like, it doesn't matter. Like, you can be rejected or embarrassed and people can laugh at you, but then it's like, especially in college, it's like, well, it depends. If you go to a really big college, it can just be like, boom, you never see them again, which is kind of sad and kind of cool at the same time. And I'm not telling you to go crazy or ruin your reputation, but I do think, for those people out there who just want that special someone one day, maybe just that crush to like them, nothing more, nothing crazy, then it's worth taking that risk. The worst thing that can happen isn't much. But more so than that, I get a lot of these questions, and if it's a once or two, if it only happened once or twice, then I can't really give you a definitive answer. You have to sort of see for more occurrences. But if it's like a dozen times, or he's brushed his hair each time he looks at me. Sometimes they just have hair in their face because they have long hair. But it really depends on how they look at you, how often they do it, how many times they've done it already, any sort of favoritism, their proximity to you. Sometimes it's just like, it's really obvious when they're like, they are encroaching on your personal space, and you can feel that this is not something a average person or stranger should be so close to you, and they're just chatting normally. It's, it just goes off immediately, and I do think I'm going to give you two techniques to help you out, just to close this out. And obviously I can talk to you for hours on this, but this is just like the basics and fundamentals. Depending on how well this video does in terms of views, comments, and requests, I may do something more in depth. But two small techniques that will very much help. This one I perfected in school. So usually there's a clock in the room. And if you catch this girl constantly staring, what you can do is this little trick called the clock trick. You wait for that moment when you feel like she's looking at you or he's looking at you. You stare at the clock and then boom, you move to her. Or you don't have to be so crazy about it, just like boom. And then if, she likes you, most likely she'll be staring at you, and as soon as she sees you, boom, make eye contact. She's like, oh my goodness, he caught me staring. And it's funny because now I'm recalling the incidents where I really started figuring this out, and I tried it, and all the times where I caught them, and it just seemed blatantly obvious, which weren't that many, honestly. I wasn't the most popular kid on the block, and even if I liked them back, I never really took it further. Perhaps it was a variety of reasons. Maybe I just not enough interest in common, didn't really know enough about it to man up or do anything, didn't know how to approach it. Chances are, even if I were to go back and do it now, it probably would be much different, because again, there's cliques and other stuff and friendships, and they were just on entirely different cliques and groups of friends, and this whole mess of stuff. But that's one technique to know, and maybe you might be that lucky person who all you really need is that a certain level of certainty that maybe she likes you back, and everything else will just flow from there. And she's not in too far a social group, or again, a lot of this stuff one can argue does not even matter. She can be in a completely different clique or social group, but if you work hard enough, if you believe, it could potentially work. So maybe that's you. Maybe I can inspire you where I have failed. But again, failure is a relative term because it only teaches you and makes you stronger and more knowledgeable for the future. And also there's plenty of fish in the sea, 3.5 billion and growing, of the opposite gender. Finally, the second tip I'm going to give you guys is just okay, so first I did the clock technique, and it works just as well. If you don't have a clock, just try something else. Focus on object, boom, catch her in the act. And I feel like sometimes you can get to work, and sometimes you can almost sort of, convince, subconsciously convince people to like you. I don't know if that's actually true, but now that I think about it, it may be a possibility because maybe they don't like you, but then all of a sudden they naturally react away when you see them doing it, and then they're like, why did I do that? Maybe I like him. And now that I think about it, I think it's happened before to a certain extent. And so there's that technique, the clock technique, but now you can do it and then realize maybe I could convince someone to like me. I don't know if that really works, but I think so to a certain extent, if they already are comfortable with you and haven't really thought of you in that way. And the final technique, I guess it's just, it's called comparison to a stranger, or comparison to someone you don't find attractive. So, first off, you would have a lot of interactions with the person that you're interested in. And you're in a situation now where you're trying to figure out whether he or she likes you. Now, you want to recall those specific memories and remember certain things like proximity to you, body language, all this stuff, and then picture maybe someone you're not interested in, someone you're not attracted to, or just a complete stranger doing that similar stuff. Now, some of it's like, okay, maybe she's that close because she's a friend. That doesn't necessarily mean she likes you. It just means she's better than a stranger. That's why she is able to get so close. But other things, let's say, I think one of the big things is if they're chatting, just naturally chatting with you, and they just come up real close to you and then just naturally chatting away. It's one of those things, and then it's just like you start thinking like, okay, if any of my other friends got this close, it's kind of weird. All this stuff like that, and they could be just saying normal stuff that a friend could say, but sometimes their body language gives it away. It may be nothing explicitly sexual with the hand or the rubbing or anything like that, but it can be something as simple as how close she stands to you. If she's pressed up, not even pressed up, but very close. And again, a lot of this evidence really has to be summed up to get a stronger piece of evidence to decide. And then even then, there's always that veil of uncertainty. And that's one of the biggest lessons I want to part with you guys here. Oftentimes in life, you will never get 100% certainty or anything close to it. And there's this quote that really, changed my way of thinking. There's hundreds of thousands of quotes that have changed my way of thinking, but this one in particular is helpful for you guys. It went something along the lines of, the brave people are not the ones who feel no fear when they take on a very scary task. The true brave, courageous, respectable people are the ones who feel the fear and do it anyways. And that, when I heard that, again, it's one of those valuable pieces of advice that not everyone gets to hear, but it just, when I really thought about it for the next few days, it just blew my mind, because it was at a time where I was struggling with approaching women. I wanted to approach like at least one female every day and express my interest or do something. It could be a stranger or anything like that. And it was such a daunting task, and I always failed at it. and I just chickened out oftentimes, even if these were like people I would never see again. And that really just, opened my eyes, because I'm like, it was just like, I was always thinking, how can I get rid of this fear? Almost thinking like the people who are good at this had no fear, and some of them don't, because they were competent and confident and competent. They were, maybe handsome or good looking or rich or whatever. Um, but